Hello, this is Sheila Bender, and you are listening to In Conversation, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today we have with us L.A. playwright Doris Baizley. She is a member of the Mark Taper Forum Writers Workshop and a founder of L.A. Theater Works. Her plays, Mrs. California, A Christmas Carol, Tears of Rage, Catholic Girls, and Sheila Rules, have been produced in many U.S. regional theaters, including the Mark Taper Forum, a contemporary theater in Seattle, the Cleveland Playhouse, the Kennedy Center, the Alabama Shakespeare Company, and the National Theater for the Deaf. Internationally, her plays have been produced at the Icon Theater in Taipei and the Semaphore Theater in Prague. Her documentary and community-based plays include One Day, Sarah House, Living and Dreaming in Hospice, which was winner of a Santa Barbara Independent Press Award for 2009's Best Original Script, and Sexting, written in collaboration with criminal defense attorney Susan Raffanti. That was the winner of the Guthrie Theater Playwrights Center Two-Headed Challenge Commission and listed by the LA Weekly as one of the 10 best plays of 2013. Freaks, The Hidden History of People with Disabilities, was co-edited with Victoria Lewis from a workshop at the Mark Taper Forum Other Voices Project for theater artists with disabilities and was published in the anthology Beyond Villains and Victims. As story editor for documentary films, she has worked with editor Mary Lampson on Emil Norman by His Own Design, which won the 2007 Miami Gay and Lesbian Film Festival HBO Audience Award. In 2007, We Still Live Here, directed by Anne Makepeace, won the Full Frame Documentary Festival Inspiration Award and Telluride Moving Mountains Award in 2011. Rebels Without a Cause was directed by Nancy Kelly and Kenji Yamamoto, won the Mill Valley Film Festival Audience Award in 2012. Most recently, Doris has story edited for cinematographer Kristen Johnson on her film memoir, A Blind Eye. Doris teaches a documentary theater course, Voices of Justice, at Loyola Marymount University and leads a playwriting workshop at the David Henry Hwang Writers Institute at East West Players in Los Angeles. She was Port Townsend's 2015 visiting master playwright for the Key City Players Playwrights Festival, and lucky we were. Welcome to the program, Doris.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to be able to talk to you today. I know that when you were teaching up here and I took your class, what you told us was that the projects you are most interested in right now are your documentary and community-based plays. And I was wondering if we could start off by you telling us a little bit about that.
I'd written lots of plays, and they all start with real material. It's not like I just make them all up completely out of my head. I think every play, no matter how fictional it is, starts out with something real. But I got involved in a group of playwrights and actors who were going around to senior centers. Each of us would interview someone, a resident at the center, and then we would turn the interview into a monologue, a poem, a song if the interviewer was a musician, and we would present 5 or 6 of these to the people who had told the stories and to a larger audience. And what I started finding out was to tell people's stories, to be able to take a real person's story and give it back to them, starts this kind of circle of communication. It's just amazing. The response from the storytellers hearing their own stories back was just amazing. And not just with the seniors, but we started doing it. I've actually started making it a course at Loyola Marymount now. And we had a wonderful session where we interviewed 7 Sisters of St. Joseph who are involved in social justice activities. Those 7 stories came back as scenes and stories and one song, and the response was just amazing. And we felt that we were communicating with people we wouldn't necessarily as writers think of when sitting alone in a room. And so I was finding that writing the words of, say, Sister Rebecca Rodriguez, I was finding out things, use of language and stories and information that was really, to me, felt much richer than something I could have made up myself. So, and then to have that circle of communication going, it just made the work feel more necessary, more, I don't know, urgent, but I think necessary is the word. The people who came to see these weren't just going to the theater to see the next thing, the next big thing. They were really coming to find out about their friends and their neighbors and people who they knew or didn't know as well as they did after the show. that was the inspiration.
And you're calling this community-based theater.
I guess the difference is, and this is kind of interesting, the community-based stuff, in my mind, this is my differentiation, everybody has a different one. I think of it as plays that start with stories from the community, stories that people want to tell, and then the writers will, or I will, fictionalize them a bit. The ones that I call documentary theater are ones where we use the real names and real facts from the lives of the people whose stories we're telling. They're more like oral histories.
I see.
And the community-based ones are more transformed into plays with characters whose names are fictionalized a bit.
I see. When I asked you if we could read an excerpt from a work here during our program, you sent something that has a narrating dog, Ginger, and a woman
right.
named Colleen.
Right.
So would this be then community-based theater? Because
yes.
there's fiction?
This is what I call, this is sort of a hybrid because this one, I collected a bunch of stories from this Fantastic Hospice in Santa Barbara. And the director of the hospice thought I'd be able to make this into some sort of theater piece. She didn't know what. But she called me up there, and I went up, and she just told me the stories of 6 or 7 people who had lived and died in her hospice. It's a place that's like a house. It's not the medical model at all. It's the social model. It's just like being in a really nice house, and it's for people who are homeless or low-income residents of the community. She told me stories of about 6 people, and when I was driving home, I realized she had given me a perfect cast. There was a young Latina woman and a black guy who'd been an athlete, an older woman who was quite colorful, and then she told me the story of this Irish couple who had worked as domestic servants for some rich families in Santa Barbara. And when they were failing, the wife brought her husband, Bert, to the hospice. And I have to tell you, the hospice director sat me down and told me this story. And I figured, well, I don't really want to have a narrator in this, but she also had a dog she liked a lot, and this beautiful dog who was sort of lying at her feet. And I decided, well, when I write this, I think I'm going to make Ginger the dog into the narrator. So I'm going to have you read Ginger the dog,
okay.
Sheila.
I'm going to ask you before I read, this has been performed?
Yes.
Tell me about the character of Ginger, just a little bit. How was this
a little backstory on Ginger?
Was Ginger performed in costume?
Not at all, not at all. Ginger was just a very physical actor who could go around and be on all fours and sort of sidle up to people. And we really used the idea that dogs are extremely sensitive to people who are sick. And so Ginger could actually sort of tell us the stories of each of the people in there. In this one, it's a scene. It's really a scene with all the staff. The whole play is for 5 people, by the way, and everybody doubles except for Ginger the dog. So the woman who plays Colleen plays all the older women. The guy who played Bert played all the disabled guys. He's in a wheelchair. He plays a disabled biker in a wheelchair. Of the 5 actors, they play about 12 parts.
I like that because I think at some level, everybody's story is our story, and our story is everybody's story. Yeah. I can't sidle too far because I have to speak into a microphone, but I'll imagine that I am.
Yes, imagine that you can go around, you can curl up in a ball on the stage, and you can even lift your leg on a plant.
Ginger's female or male?
That it depends who's playing Ginger. So I've seen Ginger played by a man and by a woman. It's just free form.
Okay.
And this is Ginger telling the story of Bert and Colleen coming to, and the whole story of Bert and Colleen at the hospice.
Okay, here I go.
Okay.
Who could forget the Irish couple, Bert and his wife,
Mrs. O'Sullivan, but you may call me Colleen.
She came with him in the ambulance. His kidneys are failing, but we're
going to get him up, and we're going to get him well. I have followed everything they said to do for years, but they lied to us, those professional physicians.
Bert said he just wanted to lie down, just wanted to close his eyes.
No, don't lie down, Bertie. No, my love, Bert, we're getting up. Bertie, eat some soup. God gave us these wonderful bodies to feed, and we put in soup, and it comes out in some poop and keeps us going. Come on, we've been married 50 years. This is not the end. And then she turns to the staff and she says, he's going to be well. The good Lord wouldn't do this. Our blessed Lord would not let us down.
Theologically, that's kind of a problem. But she...
No, don't say anything bad. We're going to get a miracle, and we're going to feed him and get him outside. Come on, Bert, we're getting up and getting dressed.
She always focused on his hair, his clothes, his food, and he just sort of shut down. But there she was, every day.
I'm going to get my miracle. I took care of him every day of our life. I tucked him in every night. I tell him, dear Bertie, say your prayers to Our Lady and our Lord for another nice day.
About day 6, Bert started to decline. That's when Paloma said, Colleen, you know, we're all praying for your miracle, but let me tell you what I'm seeing. I see a man who's failing and who doesn't have a lot of days left on earth. On that day, he started to fill with fluids and that noisy breathing. It's not painful, but it makes a lot of sounds. Colleen saw he was dying. She sat down, and instead of raising her voice, she took his hand and stroked his arm.
Listen, my darling, you're no longer Bert. You're Bertie. You're 5 years old, and I'm 8. You're Bertie, and I'm little Colleen, and we're back in Ireland, and you're playing with your soldiers and your little tanks and trucks, and the world is beautiful, and there's nothing to worry about. And our dear Lord is coming, and you're going to take one of his hands, and I'm going to take the other, and we're going off together. She turns to the staff. I could go along, but I don't think our Lord is going to let me. And then she turns back to Bert. Listen, Bert. We're going to a beautiful land, and everybody will be coming. You've got a perfect body, and life is good. And when you get to heaven, oh, my God, there's blue lakes and blue skies and no professional physicians anywhere. There's going to be our Blessed Mother and our dear Lord, and they're all going to be welcoming you and saying, there's Bertie OSullivan.
This went on for hours. All his fluids settled. He was breathing normally.
No, his fluids didn't settle. They went away. But I've been thinking, I think Bertie should tell the dear Lord he's ready. Bertie, I know you can't be talking, so I'll talk for you. You think it with your mind, and I'll say the words for you. Dear Lord, I'm Bertie OSullivan, and I'm so thankful for my life, and I'm ready to be going.
The next day, Paloma went out, and she got a call that Bert was gone. When she came back, Colleen said,
I was sitting there holding his hand, and he looked up at me and smiled. That's all that happened. And then your staff person came in and said, he's gone, Colleen. And I didn't know. It was so peaceful. He just breathed, and then he didn't. It was so peaceful. It was a miracle.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 Port Townsend. In case you've just joined us, you are listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today, Sheila Bender talks with Los Angeles-based playwright Doris Baizley about her work in theater and her current interests in writing with the words of others.
I didn't do the Irish accent because I'm not an actress. But let me tell you, the ones who do it nail it.
Even without the accent, I felt so much listening to it read aloud. I've been reading it since I wanted to do a good job. And just hearing it spoken by you, I feel such awe of your project and also of the way people help each other face the inevitable, even when they don't want to. Her turnaround's a wonderful thing in there.
Yeah, it really is. And this hospice is just an amazing place. I think there should be one on every corner for everybody in the United States because they are able to just recognize everybody's humanity. I mean, the other speech I wanted to put in, but it was just mind-blowing, was my interview with one of the staff young women who worked there, Paloma. And Paloma was telling me about the first time she had gone to work there. And you know, she was trained for nurses training, and she had worked in hospitals, but she had never worked with homeless people before. And she said she was really scared when the first guy came in. But when she saw how they were treated, how he was treated just like anybody else, and he responded to that treatment, instead of being angry and hostile, he kind of calmed down and became another part of the community. And they recognize that humanity. They have a rule they call I think they call it the Joe rule or something. It came from this guy who loved ice cream. Or the Vons rule. It was the Vons rule. Somebody who's there wants something, a resident, someone who's dying, they get it. They just get it. If you want ice cream at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody from the staff goes out and gets ice cream at 4 o'clock in the morning. And Vaughn's is the supermarket nearby, so that's why they call it the Vaughn's Roll, because apparently they have lots of runs to Vaughn's. It's an amazing place.
Will you be going back there to get more stories?
That's a good question. This play worked so well because it actually became a play, which was really amazing. I call it One Day because I used one day from the sun up to sundown to dawn to dusk and what happened in that day. But it's really hard to do it again because this one was so amazing. Just the whole project fell into place so beautifully. I mean, I think one reason is that people love that hospice so much. And there are a lot of actors and people in Santa Barbara, a wonderful director, and they just kind of came together and basically did the play. It got funding from just one reading we did to raise money. It was one of those projects that would be very hard to recreate.
Well, hopefully it'll inspire other people in other parts of the country to do a project.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say about this kind of work, the kind I was talking about, like at the senior center or with the sisters at the convent. I don't mean this glibly, but it's sort of like anybody can do it. If you're interested in writing, if you write and you know a community that's around that has stories to tell, it's very possible to go there and say, I want to do this project. I want to collect a few stories and then stage them for you. And without making it into a whole play, but just keeping a handful of monologues or scenes or whatever your writers turn their interviews into, you come up with a fantastic project. And those would be readings. They wouldn't be memorized or staged or anything. Just people stand up and read what they did to the interview that they conducted. They give it back to the storyteller. And you can do it at senior centers. You can do it at schools. You can do it. I have a friend who has a bunch of women friends who have a knitting circle that meets at the library. And she went to the library and talked to her friends, and now they're all being interviewed by other people and making a piece out of that.
That's excellent. And so many people seem to feel and truly feel that they don't have a voice, that their lifetimes and their experiences don't have an outlet to get to the larger community. And this certainly must be gratifying for everybody involved. That said, let's turn to your work as story editor briefly. Can you tell us what a story editor does and what it means to be one for someone creating a documentary or a memoir?
It's like writing with other people's work, which is a little bit what these interviews, doing these interviews is like. What I do is I work from the transcript. So a documentary director has a lot of footage, and that's fine, but what I want to look at are the words of the interviews, whatever is in words, the archival material, the dialogue, whatever they've got, the verite stuff. And so I look at the words and start identifying characters the way a playwright would. I mean, I think my strength as a documentary story editor is I'm going in with an idea about dramatic structure. And so I can help them find the characters who are the most important, the characters who have the biggest conflict, let's say, or how different characters carry a story, and just kind of see if we can shape a story together from the words. And usually these directors are really shocked because they've spent so much time just trying to put one picture on top of another. And then when they see that the words can actually carry a lot of that, and then the imagery is even better, it's kind of wonderful. It's kind of like putting playwriting at the service of the movies, but not by writing screenplays, by actually taking people's material and shaping it.
Collaboration is, when it works, is an amazing tool. Yep. And you're collaborating with the work of the filmmaker, but also obviously the stories of the people, and then your skill. And I noticed in the excerpt we read that the action takes place, it's a scene about change. Colleen changes. Yeah. And I'm sure you have an eye for that when you're looking for the story, beyond the characters.
Yes, that's really important.
I think I've heard the story begins when something is about to change.
Oh, that's a good way to say it. That's a really good way to say it.
Tell us about your time up here in Port Townsend with our Playwrights Festival.
It was an unusual experience because, first of all, I loved the teaching. That was just so much fun. To get into a room of, I don't know how many people, there were a lot of people in those classes, and to start hearing everybody's stories being told by everybody else was really great.
Well, that's because you asked us to. I was at that class when you had us do.
I know, and hearing it back, it's really funny when you ask somebody to do something and you get it back and it sounds really great. So I thought that was terrific. Although I know you've got a lot of real writers there, so.
Well, I just want to tell the listeners what your exercise was. You had us begin by turning to someone next to us, and you paired us off, and interviewing them for 5 minutes about an arriving or a leaving. And
a recent arrival or departure,
Right. And then we were to, under your direction, find a scene or a poem or a monologue or a song, I think you said. And the results were astonishing. I enjoyed very much being part of that and listening.
And the funny thing, it's a very hard thing to ask people to do because you're also asking them to transcribe it by hand directly. And that's a tough job. But one of the things I've discovered that I love after all these years of doing it is there's something, because I just did one for another project, and I had to sit down and transcribe like an hour-and-a-half interview with somebody. And I realized that when you're doing that, the other person's words, you're not even thinking about it. Their words are just coming right through your fingers. And so you kind of get into their speech pattern. And it's interesting. I love transcription.
And it was wonderful to have the leeway to create from it the monologue, the scene, the song, the poem. And you gave us some guidance on what you thought it might be or where it wanted to go. So tell us more about what you enjoyed about the teaching up here.
First of all, I just liked how responsive everybody is to it. I mean, how many people you get to turn out for a class. And there were a couple, I know we talked about Molly, I think, and somebody else. I guess this is one of the interesting things about Port Townsend is the experiences were so wide-ranging. And so you would have something in Taos, New Mexico, and then you would have something in, Iowa or North Dakota, and then something in Mexico. For me, it was really fun to teach a community of people who are from so many different places. And I've been doing a lot of these, but people are basically all in the same school or all in the same institution.
Well, we're just all in the same town, but we've been lots of places.
You're all in the same town, but man, you are from all over the place.
Yeah. I want to say for listeners that the weeks after we air this program with you, Doris, Molly Hollenbach and Wendy Chapman from Port Townsend, who were in that class with me, and I will be talking in the studio about that class and about the work and about what we did with it.
I want to hear that. I hope you'll send me that.
I will. I'll send you that link. In the class I took, Doris, you gave another exercise in addition to the interview, and it was about a curtain rising. Can you tell us more about that exercise?
Yes, right. I do that with my playwriting students at East West Players here. It's a sort of automatic writing exercise where I say to people, okay, you're sitting in a theater, you've come into the theater, the lights go to black, you're sitting in the dark, and the lights come up on. And then the exercise is, write 11 times, or at least fill the page. The lights come up on 3 guys walking down the street in Little Tokyo. The lights come up on a skyscraper looming over through a blue sky. The lights come up on. The lights come up on. The lights come up on. Well, I said, just be wild. It doesn't have to be realistic. It's just anything you want. It can be wild, sensual, anything you want. And we got some of the greatest ones. Did you hear the one where the lights came up on 3 outhouses, 3 porta potties?
Yes, I did.
Was that yours?
No, but I heard it.
Because there was a person sitting close to you. Anyway, the lights come up on 3 porta potties, which first of all I thought, oh my God, that's an amazing image. I could actually see a play that starts there.
I can too.
And then who was it? Maybe it was Cece. Somebody said, yes, and the play will be called Waiting for It to Go. Anyway, that was one of the crazier images, but there were a lot of fantastic ones from that class. I find it really liberating because I'll tell you, I have a personal mission to see plays that do not have coffee tables and couches in them. I like people to have wild stage pictures, that just any kind of stage picture that gets you thinking, gets you inspired, and plays can start anywhere. They can start on a battlement in Denmark. They can start on a field in France. I just love breaking away from the couch and the coffee table.
Yes. I think for me what was intriguing about the exercise was the repetition of the lights come up on, the lights come up on, because you become kind of hypnotized and you start not caring what you put after it. And it's in that abandon, I think, that some of these images arrive. And you just, okay, that's what I thought, so I'll write that.
Yep.
And then you look back and You have a teacher who goes, oh, that's a really wild and crazy one. I can see that opening a play. And you realize that sometimes tapping into creativity is easy if you don't worry too much.
If you don't think.
But then the hard part happens, right? What do you think the hardest part about writing a good play is?
Well, then the hard part is for me is when I get to page 75.
That's when it becomes hard?
Yep. It's almost like I've got this play in my head. I'm kind of coming around the end to the ending it, and I just have a really hard time. I tend to end plays 3, 4, or 5 times. And I could still go back over my plays and say, look at this. This has ended 3 times. I've got to get rid of 2 of those. It's interesting because I sort of fall in love with my characters and my situations, and I don't want them to stop.
Right.
So I keep finding out more stuff that can happen in the last few minutes, and then I'm like, no, you got to stop it.
Have you ever written a sequel?
Yes, I have. I was writing about Vietnam back in the early 90s, about experiences I had just around being involved with people who went and people who protested back in the late 60s, early 70s. And I found that I wrote one play that was set in 1968 dealing with the subject. I finished it. That one was Tears of Race. And we did it at ACT in Seattle, and I did it a few times, and it was okay, but I still didn't feel satisfied. So I took a lot of the same characters and put them into the early 80s, something like that, when Vietnam has just been opened, and made a whole new play that I called Mimi's Guide from that. That would have been contemporary with when I was writing it. Then I liked that. We did that in L.A., but I still felt like I hadn't done with the subject, so I set it in the future, and I made my character, my female lead, who is really kind of the me character, I put her in the future and made her in her 70s, early 80s. So far, that's been the only thing that I've done a sequel to. And we did it. I would like to do it again.
I'm glad to hear that you've done it, because I think it's one thing you can do with a world you've created and people you've created. We have to come to the close of the program, and I want people to be sure to know that they can Google your name and how to spell it, Doris.
Okay, it's Baizley.
Thank you. And if we Google your name, we'll find a lot of opportunities to learn more about your plays and more about the organizations. I listen to LA Theater Works on NPR, and now I'll be thinking about you. And thank you for co-founding that.
We're 40 years old now.
Wow.
So that's pretty amazing.
I thank you again for giving us a glimpse into your life as a playwright, your teaching, your ideas, your attachment to being able to dramatize stories that are the stories of real people in real situations. It means a lot, and I just want to thank you for coming up here and making it possible for many of us to meet you and work with you, and I hope you get back to Port Townsend soon.
I do too. Thank you, Sheila. That was really fun to talk about.
Thank you.
You have been listening to In Conversation, Discussions on Writing and the Writing Life with Sheila Bender. For more of Sheila's interviews, please go to Sheila's website, www.writingitreal.com/audio.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman. Announcer is Kurt Vanderslice.